So off we go on the merry-go-round again, back in F1 with Yamaha, and I went in there essentially as the truckie, but also because the Japanese lads had really no experience of F1 at all. I started sort of, handling all the logistics for them and the booking the hotels and everything like that, and they were a fabulous bunch of guys to work for, and unfortunately very much maligned because that engine was a bit of a pig. But again, as I said with Judd earlier, these little small independent, like Yamaha, not a small independent, but they were still small in racing terms.
Yes.
They were known for the motorbikes, and of course they were fantastically successful at that. But I'll always defend the effort that all of these people put in, and all you see on you'll see posts on Facebook about that Yamaha engine was crap and killed Brabham, killed Jordan, everything like that. Well, these people just don't know the effort that was put in to that program, and I would defend them till the day I die, to be honest with you, because I was part of that. I know that I was out the country for sort of like 42 weeks every year, putting my effort into it. And of course, I was getting, we made a reasonable living out of it. And again, I enjoyed what I did. It wasn't for me, the actual engineering side of it, because I've always been a bit of a dunce on all that kind of thing. I understand a lot of it, but I'm not a racing man. I was there for the crack, really.
Yeah, for the fun of it. Absolutely. So who are your drivers at Brabham in 91?
Mark Blundell and Martin Brundle.
Oh, okay. The Blundell twins.
Of which the Japanese chaps had great fun trying to pronounce their names.
I bet.
Because, anybody who doesn't know, in the Japanese pronunciations, they get their L's mixed up with their R's. So it was always Mark Brundell and Martin Blundell. And in the end, they just became Mark and Martin. They gave up trying to use Brundle and Blundell, So, but yeah, it was. Those are the drivers there. Again, it was such. Brabham weren't the Brabham of old. There was that car. That car wasn't fantastic. We went to Phoenix for the first race, and I think we ran. You'll tell me better, probably. Was it a Brabham 59Y or something like that?
Yeah, I think that's right. Actually, I think that's right.
Yeah, and so we ran that round, and we probably took that to South Africa as well. And then I think they brought the BT60 out for, the European races or something. But, just constant engine problems, cooling problems. The thing, it spent more time on high stands than it did on the circuit. And I think we scored 1 point all season. And Mark got a 6th place at Spa, which was obviously the first race of Schumacher in the Jordan. So we got 6th place for that, and I organised Yamaha to give Mark, I think it was a RS 600 diversion bike.
Right.
So he ended up with a reasonable sort of little prize out of that one. But yeah, it was. Brabham were, they're obviously in the last knock-ins of that. And of course, for the following season, Eddie Jordan, they'd had a fantastic season with the 191 and the Cosy, but Eddie being Eddie was looking for an engine for 92, and of course the deal was done to run the Yamahas because it was a free engine. And Bernie had organised the deal with Sasol, who are obviously a South African oil company. And I think Bernie organised that, you know, the engine came with the Sasol deal, really. But Jordan had obviously had a fantastic first season, and then came back down to earth with an incredible bump in '92. Yes. You know, and we ended up pre-qualifying and everything like that. And it was just, it was hard work. It was hard work. Yeah.
So were you still, for 92 then, Ed, you were still engine?
Yeah, still the Yamaha guy. Yeah. And yeah, I mean, again, we did, I think I was out to the UK for like 42 weeks.
Yeah, that's a lot.
Because it was obviously start of the season was pre-season testing. Then you do race, test, race, test, race, test. I mean, I could be out for 6 weeks without coming back home. I remember coming back from, I think we'd raced in, where were we? Monza. Yeah, I'm sure it was Italy somewhere. It was somewhere down that way. And I drove back because I used to run that truck on my own. And I drove back in one hit from Monza, which was about 24 hours. And because we'd been testing. And of course, the bloody engineers, they wanted to test until 5 o'clock on the Friday.
Right, exactly.
And then, of course, I'd got to drive all the way back to the UK, pick up a load of engines, turn the truck round, ready to go out again. Well, I got back to Milton Keynes sort of like 24 hours later. Packed, you know, got my bag, drove back up to the Midlands to my house. My then wife in the evening tripped down the stairs, broke her ankle. We ended up spending all night in A&E. And then on the morning, I'd got to drive back down to Milton Keynes, pick the truck up, and then drive off to Hungary or wherever it was, you know. But it was just relentless. But you did it, you know. I was a younger chap, and you know, and all you did half the time then, I mean, it was highly illegal. But you know, I used to run 2 tacos in the truck. So you'd pretend you'd got 2 drivers. If ever you were stopped and they had a look, well, where's your other driver? And I'll say, oh, he's in, you know, he jumped out to help another guy. He's in a truck 2 or 3 mile back. I said, if you have a look out for him, you'll see him as he comes by. Well, of course, there was never another driver. It was me. But no, you did what you had to do. And, you know, I think that's been the case with everybody who gets involved with this game.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, even today, I mean, a lot of people, I mean, us older guys sort of decry a lot of what the new fellas do, because I think back in the day as well, you had to be more of you had to know every bit on the car. I mean, I'm not talking me, but the mechanics and that. You had to know every part of the car. You had to know, like 2 or 3 of you could run a car. I mean, it's like when, you know, I know that you and me have spoken about some of these other cars and that. I mean, even running them now. I mean, a friend of mine now is running that Brabham. He's running that BT60. But he just needs a couple of fellas to run that car. Okay, it's different if you've got an all-nighter and you've got to rebuild it or something like that. But you didn't have all the computers and all the rest of it, and, you know, 45 blokes just to sort of plug the starter in, or the PU, or whatever they call it these days.
Just an air start.
Yeah, that's right. But, you know, the guys knew how to do everything on those cars, and they'd run them that way. And as I say, the likes of myself, I mean, I knew a lot of how to get stuff from A to B.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And you know, and I'd help out on the cars. I'd help kit engines and things like that. But I certainly would never profess to be an expert on any of that kind of thing.
Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah.
So towards the end of 92, were you out of work again? 92.
That was by choice in the end, because I'd been from 86 through to the end of 92. I'd been, apart from the times I've described where, you know, I might have been on just truck driving on general haulage and that, I was working for teams, but I was constantly out of the country. And I'd just burnt out at the end of 92. As I say, for 91 and 92, I'd been out for, it's like being on tour for 42 weeks of the year. And my missus and kids came out to Australia after the last race. And I'd been offered another 2-year contract by Yamaha. And I said, I'll go away and think about it. Anyway, missus and kids came out to Australia. Well, my boy, when I started traveling, was 1. And he's suddenly 9.
Oh, blimey.
And we're kicking a ball about on the beach on the Gold Coast. And he said, Dad, he says, I don't want you to travel away anymore. He says, I want you to come and play football with me. And that said it. And I'd had enough. I'd just had enough. I mean, the music side of my involvement in F1 is like another story, but that had also started to take up quite a bit of my time. And I think Yamaha recognised that it was also taking up a bit of my time. One of the things, strangely enough, because Yamaha had such a torrid time with the engine and bad publicity and everything. Well, of course, Yamaha are also known for building some of the most fantastic musical instruments. Well, I got a deal with Yamaha Music in UK for wherever my F1 band was playing, they would provide us with the gear we needed. Yeah, you know, if we were playing in Portugal, Japan, Australia, or whatever, I'd just pick the phone up and they would find somewhere to, you know, let us have the back line for whatever we needed. And I got told by one of the high-up Yamaha guys, he came to one of the last races, it might have been Australia, he said, Eddie, he says, we're very proud of what you've done for Yamaha. He said, we've obviously had big problems with the automotive side of it. He says, but you have promoted the Yamaha brand in F1 in a way that we could never have thought would happen. And he said, and you with the music, with the, you know, the Pit Stop Boogie Boys and that, have really promoted Yamaha in a fantastic way and taken away, because I hadn't realised, but apparently Yamaha Motors and Yamaha Music had split up years ago. I think two of the big bosses back in the day had fallen out, and so they'd gone their separate ways. But I think it was Mr. Hasegawa who said this, and he said that I had actually, from what I'd done, was actually brought these two factions a little bit closer together, which, be it true or not, I don't know. But I mean, it was a nice little sort of, it was a nice little pat on the back for what I'd been up to, you know.
Mm. That was nice. So yeah, you finished.
Yeah, I came back. We came back from Australia as a family and that, and I said, you know, I phoned Yamaha and Mr. Kimura, and I said, and obviously Herbie Blash was he was still sporting director of it. But I think Herbie's still involved to this day. I'm not quite sure with Yamaha, but yeah, but no, I'd just had enough, and I said no, I need a breather from this, and so I started another little business back home. I mean, I was sort of probably the forerunner of Poundland. I took a couple of indoor market stalls and that, and started selling, the stuff that you get in Poundland these days. And I'd sort of, because one of the things that you do when you're traveling away for such a long period of time is you never actually touch your wages. So
no, that's right.
You're living off the truck or off your plumbing expenses all the time. So I'd sort of built up a little few quid, and I invested it into a couple of these businesses, and they went down in flames pretty damn quickly together with my money. But but you give it a go. You give it a go, and then moving sort of swiftly forward, like a few years, I started getting involved with sportswear. I got involved with it because I mean my parents had bought this company. It's sort of like in janitorial supplies and everything like that. Together with my brother. I mean, my brother sold his house to put his stake into the business, and they asked me to get involved. And I said, what the hell do I want to sell bleach and bog rolls for when I'm traveling around the world sort of 5-star? So, yeah, I wasn't really interested in that. But then I got involved with it a little bit later on. And I set up like a little sort of like sportswear division. And we were supplying, football teams, actually 1 or 2 Premier League teams in the end. And but again, that football game was just like F1. I mean, it was just a case of people never paying the bills. A lot
of that around.
Yeah, you get sort of blinded by the bright lights of it in a way. I mean, a lot of people get involved in racing and then suddenly realise that it's way beyond them, and they last for 5 minutes. So it's the same in football. And then in '98, going back to autosport, I thought, well, I want to get back into racing. I've had it long enough out of it. So I saw a little local team who were running a one-car effort in British touring cars. And a guy called Lee Brooks, and they were running a couple of year old Honda Accord. But they were only sort of like 4 or 5 miles from my house. So it was a local little thing. So I did that for the season. Then, of course, the end of the season, the doors come down again. So I'm looking for another job. Back to autosport. Saw a job as a tyre fitter, and doing all that for a company called BMTR in Birmingham, who, Paul Smith and what have you. And they, of course, they run all the tyres for historic Grand Prix, thoroughbred Grand Prix, and of course then all of the local clubby meetings and hill climbing and everything. I think they used to cover about 95 meetings a year. And so I got into that, and then we were you get an order come through, so and so wants some wets for his for his Group C car or whatever car he got. We didn't have moulded wets. Well, Avon did do some moulded wets, but in general, you had to hand cut them.
Really?
Yeah. Most of the wets we cut by hand.
Right.
And
gosh, how long did that take?
Pardon?
How long was that taking on one tyre?
On one tyre, it just depends. I mean, we had different patterns on them. Because you'd use, for instance, like on some of the, like the Group C cars and that. I mean, sometimes you'd use like a V pattern, so you'd be cutting the rubber out. You'd mark everything, chalk it all up. You use a balancing machine, and then you chalk all the lines out, and then you cut them with a grooving iron, and then you cut out different patterns. But one of the classic patterns, really, which you'll normally see, say, like on, say you look at a Jim Clark car or something like that, they're all grooves, but then like with little notches all the way around the tyre. And of course, that was all for different ways of water dispersion and that. But a lot of the time, it was, I don't think there was a huge amount of technology in those tyres then. It was just a case of reducing the contact patch for when you're running in the wet and just to get the water away from the tyres. But yeah, we'd cut these things, and I don't know. I mean, you'd work pretty quickly on them. I mean, maybe a rear tyre would take you 10 minutes.
Oh, right, as quick as that?
Something like that, yeah, just depending.
Oh, right.
Yeah, 10, maybe 10, 15 minutes. So, but I mean, you'd have a set of tyres done in, 45 minutes. Yeah, to an hour. I mean, one or two of the guys on there, I mean, old Billy Crawford had been doing the job for years, and he was a dab hand at cutting these tyres, and he'd get a set done in half an hour, and then he'd and then he got a shed he got a shed at the unit. I mean, Billy's no longer with us, so he'll forgive me on this, but what you used to do was, as I mentioned before about some of the less well-heeled runners and that, a lot of teams and drivers, well, they weren't teams as such, but they would buy new sets of tyres. Well, some of the old, the poorer drivers they'd buy a set of used tyres, or a set of runners, we called them, set of part warns. Well, Bill over at BMTR's base, he got a shed where when the trucks came back with all these old tyres on, he'd have his own shed with his own stock in there. Well, of course, some of the drivers used to come to specifically see Bill. So those tyres always got sold twice.
Yeah, of course they did. Brilliant.
Yeah, But the other thing that I always found funny as well was because old Smithy, he knew every damn tyre that was in that warehouse, every single one. And somebody would, they'd phone him up and say, I'm building an old, I've got an old Can-Am car or an old McLaren or some old big banger that, he's had in the workshop for the last 12 years trying to fix it up. Yeah. We needed some tyres for it. And very often they would be old cross plies, which, they were. So they'd phone up and say to Smithy, have you got these such and such a sizes? Yeah, he says, I know where there's a set of them. So we'd come down the warehouse and climb up into the rafters and find this old set of crushed cross-ply tyres covered in cobwebs and dust. And that was his mature stock. Now, some of the rubber on those tyres was probably not in prime condition. And he probably paid like a $5 a tyre for it or something to clear them out, because you never know when you were going to need anything like this. I mean, Paul was very much always a just in case. Put these on the truck just in case. You knew there was no Formula Ford race that particular weekend. He said, but stick some Formula Ford tyres on just in case anybody needs them. And you knew damn well that every single race there'd be somebody there wanting to buy some Formula Ford tyres. So he was always right, but he knew the game. But no, he'd get these old bloody dusty tyres down, and we fit them up to some wheels that probably should never have been run on the car. So they probably weren't crack checks. They weren't done this, that, and the other. But then he'd sell them out at full whack, probably 500 quid a tyre or something for this mature stock. But the thing was, you couldn't buy them anywhere else.
Well, that's it, isn't it?
And a man's got to make a living, my boy.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Oh dear. So
go on.
Sorry, 2001. I've got a note here.
Yeah.
You do European Minardi things with Paul Stoddart.
I was, yeah. I was, once again, I was sort of lured by
the glamour.
Lured by the glamour, so to speak. Well, of course, we'd been supplying tyres to the Boss series, which people like Paul Stoddart was running. Tyrrells and
that was a series of fairly recent F1 cars, wasn't it?
Yeah. They were cars from sort of like really sort of the late, shall we say, the
mid to late
90s.
90s?
Yeah, I mean, because you got guys like Tony Warswick, who was running a Jordan 191. Yeah, he was running a Jordan to start with, which was in a yellow colour. You know, I mean, for me, I mean, if you're going to run these iconic cars, run them in the colours that they were running.
Oh,
you know,
but
anyway, that was the thing, and of course, BMTR were supplying. You know, they were tyre suppliers through Avon. Because you couldn't get Goodyears, you couldn't get Bridgestones or Michelins or anything like that. So, you know, we did Avon tyres. I mean, for instance, going on to the back to the Thoroughbred Grand Prix, we did the tyres for the Tyrrell 6-wheelers.
Oh, the P34,
yeah, because those obviously 10-inch diameter tyres. Well, they were basically mini tyres. And that's what they ran on the, because Avon were the only people that would tool up and build those things. But yeah, I sort of thought, okay, well, I wasn't, again, because I'm not a mad motor racing fan. I didn't mind doing one or two of the trips on the Thoroughbred Grand Prix or that, but I really wasn't that mad on going to Chelsea Walsh and Prescott and running on the hills, and then Croft and Snetterton and places like that. I mean, you know, they didn't float my boat very much. But I thought
the same as Monza or Spa or
Suzuka. Well, that's right. Yeah, I mean, you know, the work's the same at the end of the day, and you didn't have to mess about with ferries or getting over to Europe. But no, they were looking for Paul was looking for Stoddart was looking for truckies. So I went on the F3000 team and did that. And of course, they were, you know, Paul had got all the 2-seaters as well. So you know, we did that.
Weren't they the 2-seaters, Ed? I can't remember now. Were they adapted F1 Tyrrells?
They were Tyrrells, yeah, for 97 Tyrrells. Right, well, of course, Paul bought all the assets. He bought the Tyrrell team. He bought all the assets. Bought all the cars, and he bought everything. And I think I can't quite remember now. There was something going on between Tyrrell and BAR and all that kind of thing.
That's right.
But of course, anyway, the deal came to buy Minardi, and so Paul had been sponsoring cars for Eddie Jordan and for Arrows, and you know, he tried to do deals with Tom Walkinshaw and everything like that. But in the end, I think the opportunity came up to buy Minardi, probably in the January or something like that. And Paul went over to the factory in Faenza, and I think all they got was a wooden mock-up of that season's car. So Paul said, okay, we've got a race in 3 months or 10 weeks or whatever it is in Melbourne. We've got to build a car. And that's exactly what he did. And Paul took a hotel out in Faenza, and he was flying guys in, and of course he got a big facility down at Ledbury, so a lot of the carbon work was being done in England. Paul had obviously got his own aircraft, so he was flying stuff out there. He was flying blokes out there. He got this hotel, and one guy would go and do a 12-hour shift building the cars. He'd come back to the hotel, go to bed, and somebody else would go and do the shift, and then there was like hotbedding.
Yeah, flip-flops.
In the end, everybody knows that you know, they got that car out to Melbourne, and I think they got the one car out there which Alonso was driving, and I think the other one was built in the garage. And I think off the top of my head, I think it was Tarso Marquez, and it was an incredible achievement of what they did then. But of course, you know, me, I was on the 3000 team, and of course we supported a lot of the European races, but we also went out to Sao Paulo as well, and did the support with the 3000 there. And then we did, as I say, the two-seater thing. Of course, Paul had built 6 of these cars, and we ended up racing them.
All right.
You know, Paul got this thing together, you know, which was Thunder in the Park at Donington, and he got drivers. I mean, the most notable one was getting Damon to drive the car. Sorry, Damon was the following year. Nigel, that's right. Yeah, and he got Nigel. He got Alonso. I think David Salins, who was a F3000 driver, and one or two others, you know. And in the end, we raced these things. And Nigel was famous in that one again for crashing it. And
this is with the passenger on board, don't forget.
Well, yeah. Well, what happened was that the guy that he got in the car, in the passenger seat, was a guy called Jonathan Frost, who'd made a few bob in, I think, in mobile phones and what have you. And Paul had held an auction down in Monaco for this seat to drive with a shotgun to Nigel Mansell. Well, this guy, I think he bid for it, and it was about, I don't know, 40,000 quid or something. And Nigel, you know, so this guy sat in the back of this car. Louise Goodman was in the back of the car with Alonso, and whoever. I mean, I think there were one or two pop stars in the other cars, but anyway, towards the end of the race, Nigel, they're coming around the top hairpin at Donington, and Nigel launched himself across the top of Alonso's car, and I think his rear wheel nearly took Louise's head off, and it was, you know, and they went up in the air and came down with a bang and everything. Anyway, Nigel, I think he got out the car, went and got changed, and off he went. You know, didn't see him after that. But of course, we did the rest of the season, and then in 2002. This is all sort of like pertinent to it as well. At Monza in 2001, I remember we'd driven. We were going to the race, and I'd taken my lad with me in the truck just for a bit of a jolly, and we went and parked the truck up at the circuit, and then went off to find a hotel. And as we went to get something to eat in this little shopping centre, and we noticed like an electrical type shop, like a Comet as it was in the day, with a load of TVs on. And there was lots of people stood there watching these TVs, and I thought, well, you know, what's happening here? And I thought they were all watching a film of the Tower in the Inferno. And they were all, you know, the commentary on this thing was in Italian. The people were all talking Italian. We didn't understand what was going on. And then we saw the second plane go into the World Trade Center. And we couldn't believe what was happening. So obviously Paul Stoddart was in aviation. And so me and my lad, we went back to... It's all right, I'm getting a phone call coming through. Went back to the hotel, and we sat and watched what unfolded through the whole of that day. And I remember, I mean, my parents were actually in Florida, and they were stuck there for a week because, of course, the Americans just closed down any air travel. But you know, moving forward to the, you know, to Paul and that, it was a very massive sort of hit on his aviation business. You know, it was a big thing. But in the end, Paul found the. I think he got offered 6 jumbo jets, because Paul's main business was buying and selling aircraft, but mainly buying spares and what have you. But Paul bought 6 747s at absolute knockdown prices. Now, to you and me, it was still a lot of money, but you know, I don't know, 5 million quid a plane or something like that. So what he did was he actually broke 3 of them for spares, and then he flew 3 of them. And we were going out to Malaysia and Australia for the start of the 2002 season. And he was taking the 2-seaters out as well. So anyway, what had happened was, because European Aviation was based down in Bournemouth, and it's just a small provincial airport. And Paul had got sort of like, I think, 737s and, you know, small aircraft that can fly out of Bournemouth. Well, he decided to bring one of these 747s into Bournemouth, because they'd never had an aircraft of that size there before. And I think the sort of like air traffic control or whatever said, you'll never get it in. Oh, no, we'll get it in, you know. Anyway, I think this plane came in, and I think the undercarriage took down all the landing lights on the approach to the thing. Now, it was one thing getting it in, but it was another thing getting it out because of the length of the runway. But anyway, we're off to Australia and Malaysia. And of course, we signed Alex Young and Mark Webber. And anyway, so we take all the freight down to Bournemouth and we load everything up. But they said, you've got to put all of the freight at the rear of the aircraft, including the cars and everything that we needed. So there's probably 12 of us going from the UK, and we get on the plane, and Paul had most of this plane sort of built out to like first class and business class. There's very little sort of like cattle class, but to take off, they asked us to all go and sit at the back of the plane. So we've got the weight all on the tail, including all the freight and everything like that. Anyway, we get out of, you know, we get out of Bournemouth, and we fly off to Italy to pick up all the Italian Minardi guys, and then fly out to Malaysia for the car launch. The first race was Melbourne, but we went to Malaysia for a couple of days to, you know, to meet and greet and grin and grip and all the rest of it with all the Malaysians, and we ended up on TV on the Malaysian lottery and everything like that, and yeah, it was all good fun. And then we fly from Malaysia to Australia. Well, 1 or 2 of the lads decided to basically drink the plane dry, and we get into Australia. Of course, it's an Australian team owner with his own aircraft, with an Australian driver. And so there was this huge, massive fanfare of when we landed into
Melbourne.
We couldn't land at Melbourne Airport because essentially this was a private plane.
All right.
And Paul hadn't got a commercial license to land at Melbourne. So we had to land at this place called Avalon, which was an RAF or Australian Air Force airbase. And they'd set up everything for us. And of course, this plane comes into Avalon, and they'd got the the Victorian Prime Minister or whatever he is, and the brass bands going and everything. And it was, you know, TV coverage and everything like that. Well, they put the steps up to the plane, and off start staggering all these worse for wear mechanics. And I'll always remember one of the guys, and I won't put his name there, but he was one of Jackie Stewart's old mechanics. Anyway, he'd had plenty, and he slipped on the stairs, and one of our engine guys, big fella, managed to grab him by the collar. Just he was about to do a full somersault with twist and pike in front of Australian TV. But it was so funny. It was so funny, and then of course we did the weekend, and we were doing demo runs with the 2-seater and everything like that, and getting all the Aussie sports stars and celebrities in the car. And then, of course, during the race, Mark Webber got 5th, and he scored 2 points. And I think it's the only ever time that a 5th place driver was ever allowed up on the podium.
Yes, afterwards.
Yeah, and Paul and you know, Mark and what have you had their own. They had their own ceremony up there, and I tell you what, I mean, the party after that was still going on at daylight the following day. And I know Schumacher won the race, and he went off to the Ferrari party. I think he lasted about an hour there, and then he came to our party because he knew where the fun was going to be. And Michael was there till we all chucked out in the morning. I mean, he was I can see him now with a big cigar on and all that kind of thing. Yeah, and he was.
Ed, we've actually overrun a little bit, and we're going to have to call it a day there.
Sorry, no problem.
But thanks so much.
Probably covered most of it anyway. So
yeah, fair enough. Yeah, good. Yeah, that was good fun.
Brilliant. Well, I've enjoyed it. I've enjoyed it. Yeah.
Cheers for that. So we'll see you soon anyway.